This is the biggest guy the world has ever seen touch a basketball. Is it even legal for this dude to be 6'10", 500 pounds and play basketball? This is a man so powerful even LeBron would be afraid, moving around the court like Steph, with handles like Iverson. To be honest, I've never seen anything like Troy Escalade Jackson. While you probably never heard of Troy, you've definitely heard of his older brother, Mark Jackson, former NBA star and current NBA commentator. How is it at 6'1" Mark was able to make it to the league, but not Troy? And that's just the first question that popped into my head. How does someone even get to 500 pounds and then stay not just mobile, but be also incredibly athletic? How do you function in society being this big? Like, what kind of toilet does this dude sit on? Troy Escalade Jackson is one of the most fascinating people in all of sports history, and it's time we answer all of these questions and more. Troy was always a man destined for the NBA. Falling in love with basketball at around 10 years old, he practiced and played day and night at Rucker Park in Harlem. And while he was just a chunky kid having fun playing ball, his brother Mark was well on his way to the NBA. In fact, when Troy was just 14 years old, their family hit the lottery when Mark was drafted 18th in the 1987 NBA draft, completely changing Troy's life in the direction it was headed. Imagine being a 14-year-old with a brother in the NBA. How many Big Macs would you order? Because Troy started ordering a lot. At this point, Troy was already a pretty spoiled kid, being the youngest of 6 siblings. But now with a brother in the NBA making millions, a lot of the motivation Troy had was gone. His family already made it, and he was practically set for life. So instead of focusing on getting in shape, preparing for the NBA, scouting out colleges, or even pestering his older brother for NBA advice, Troy decided he'd rather put on a show down at Rucker Park. And that's exactly what he did.
Oh my goddess, yeah, she the hottest, that's plain and simple. I'll bring on out your Holy Spirit if I bless the temple. I slow it down. I don't lose one-on-one.
Throughout Troy's next 4 years of high school, he wasn't focused on making it to the NBA. He was focused on showing off and really just flexing on all these kids a quarter of his size. By his senior year of high school, approximately 1,000 Big Macs later, Troy hit his peak size, standing at 6'10" and weighing well over 500 pounds. Although Troy really had put no focus into making it to the NBA, his size alone had attracted scouts to come watch him play. Not in your typical high school games, but down at Rucker Park. Being 6'10", 500 pounds doesn't leave you with a lot of options. It's not like Troy could go work in an office job in a cubicle. He couldn't even walk through the door. So when he was offered a full-ride scholarship to Wallace Community College in Selma, Alabama, he felt like he had to take it. What else could he do other than make it to the NBA? Proving there was more than enough room for a 500-pound player in college, Troy performed well past expectations. While he wasn't playing at the highest levels of college ball, Troy's complete disregard for the multiple defenders on him solidified a long-term spot on the roster, finally catching the eye of a Division I school after he received all-region honors as a sophomore. Troy was approached with another full-ride scholarship to the University of Louisville. Under the supervision of legendary coach Denny Crum, Troy's scholarship was not without its conditions, essentially stating he had to replace the Big Macs with salads. Troy was expected to drop well below the 400-pound mark, a weight he hadn't seen since his early high school days back at Rucker Park. This, along with being placed on a team whose style of play was more structured than anything he had ever experienced before, Troy's production plummeted. No longer having extra weight to put to use, he was now a big man on a roster who frankly saw him as a freak. Playing only 20 games over his 2-year stint at Louisville, the only thing Troy gained from his experience was a bachelor's degree in communications. Depressed and down on his luck, Troy turned to the one thing he loved more than being at Rucker Park: his love for the McDonald's Big Mac. Going to the same McDonald's he had gone to as a kid in Harlem, Troy was out of college, back in town, and back on his way to 500 pounds. With time on his hands, Troy quickly found himself a spot playing with the Harlem Globetrotters. Now, Troy would only play alongside them for a brief period, but he had no idea that his next big opportunity was just around the corner. While Troy was busy dunking on some 100-pound kids down at Rucker Park, right down the street was a small sports gear company, a company known as And1. Now, at the time, And1 was in its infancy, and as a company, they were looking for any way to market their sports apparel. And that's when a tape landed on their desk, showing off some local street ball highlights. Quickly realizing the unlimited potential in New York's forgotten street ball legends, and one became known across New York not for their appeal, but for their street ball tapes. Starting out as a gimmicky tape, and one mixtape volume 1 was given out if you bought $100 of apparel. And people were quick to line up and down the street like this tape was a new Supreme drop. And one immediately realized they had struck gold here, organizing an And One tour that promoted the company's image, establishing rosters by season like any other formal league would. And one broke into significance after scoring airtime on ESPN in the early 2000s, which just so happened to be the time Troy Escalade Jackson jumped on the scene, making a crater-like impact that rose and won to national recognition. Troy's instant popularity amongst fans as the lovable giant made him a staple of the league's subsequent tours. Joining up with the team the same year as ball-handling legend and now YouTuber, The Professor, Troy found an unlikely friend in the 5'10", 150-pound point guard. With Troy's presence, And One quickly started expanding from New York to Miami, Philly, DC, and eventually across the nation. And One's success is almost exclusively owed to the 500-pound ball-handling monster. And just like that, And One took the nation by storm, selling out arenas. Thousands of fans lined up eagerly to see just how Escalade could move up and down the court like a Ferrari. Reaching an all-time peak in popularity in 2005, Troy had done the impossible when he and The Professor made the cover of Sports Illustrated. A cover that historically was reserved for only the most legendary athletes was now dominated by someone who survived strictly off of Big Macs. As the biggest recorded player in history to pick up a basketball, Troy was easy to spot, and he impressed all who saw him. But as the years would go on, Troy became caught up in the image he had created for himself, the lovable giant. I mean, just to put his popularity in perspective, this is a guy who was more well-known playing in a discount league than actual NBA players. Troy could walk into any club in the country and get VIP treatment, literally, while guys playing for legit NBA teams would go unnoticed. His size, his ability, his personality all played a role in becoming the fan favorite he was, and everything that made him so great also led to his biggest tragedy. Despite his talent, there was no escaping the inevitable. Growing older in age, Troy's weight issues came knocking. Of all his teammates, it would be The Professor that had noticed Troy's weight was no longer helping him in the same way it used to. Instead, it was now slowing him down. Worried about how Troy's weight was affecting his performance and ability to play throughout the season, The Professor tried nudging Troy into a healthier lifestyle. Failing to keep the weight off that he would lose during the summer, The Professor went to his brother Mark for help. Having always known Troy as the biggest kid in town, Mark wasn't surprised. Agreeing that Escalade was just always going to be Escalade, the two decided to just accept the fact that Troy just wasn't interested in losing weight. And how could he be? Troy's entire success story gravitated around the fact he was such a great baller at his weight, doing things no one thought possible. Placed in a position to double down and continue his career at his weight, or listen to his body at the risk of losing it all, Troy made the decision many of us would. After years of abuse, his body had finally reached a breaking point. In 2011, while in the middle of promoting an upcoming street ball tour, Troy unexpectedly died in his sleep at the age of 38. Having just passed his physical to play with the Ball Up tour, Troy's death came as a huge surprise to everyone but himself. Diagnosed with hypertensive heart disease, Troy's inability to lose the weight when he needed to had come full circle. And just like that, the sports world lost one of its most fascinating characters, redefining what it meant to be a sports entertainer. Troy's impact on basketball is one that will never be forgotten. He was clearly a man with the connections, skill, drive, and talent to make it to the NBA and beyond. But at the end of the day, Troy followed what he truly loved until the day he died, being the lovable giant that really just wanted to entertain. If you've enjoyed this video, then we're sure you'll enjoy the next one. Click on right now and enjoy.